The cheap leather chair squeaked as I signed the deed, handing over 35 years of sweat and double shifts to the only child I ever loved. I thought I was securing his future, but the second the ink dried, my phone buzzed. It was a text from him, standing right outside the glass, telling me my role in his life was finished. He smiled at his wife, unaware that he had just armed the woman who would destroy them both. My name is Margaret O'Connell, though most people just call me Maggie. At 58 years old, I have learned to find comfort in the sterile, organized chaos of the Everlight Haven Clinic network, where I work as a shift manager. But sitting here in this small, glass-walled notary office in downtown Denver, I felt entirely out of my element. The air conditioner rattled overhead, mixing with the rhythmic chugging of a large printer in the corner and the faint, acidic smell of stale coffee that seemed to cling to the cheap fabric of the chairs. On the desk between us lay a stack of documents thick enough to choke a shredder. This was it. The deed to my house. The only significant asset I possessed, representing nearly 35 years of double shifts, skipped vacations, and the kind of aggressive saving that makes your joints ache. I was signing it over to my son, Luke O'Connell. Mike, the young bank employee with a tie that was slightly too wide for his collar, tapped the paper with a pen. He looked at me with a hesitation I had seen 1,000 times in the eyes of patients receiving bad news. Mrs. O'Connell. I need to make sure you understand the permanence of this, Mike said, his voice soft. Once you sign this quitclaim deed, Luke will be the sole legal owner. He will have full rights to the property, including the ability to sell or mortgage it without your consent. You will have no legal claim to the home anymore. I smiled at him, the warm, reassuring smile of a mother who believes she is doing the ultimate good. I understand, Mike. It is a gift, a start for him and his wife. He is a good boy. I reached for the pen. My hand did not shake. This was right. This was what Patrick would have wanted before he passed. I pressed the ballpoint tip to the signature line. Margaret O'Connell. As I looped the final L, my phone buzzed against the hard surface of the desk. It was a text message. I glanced down, expecting a thank you or a love you, Mom, from Luke, who I knew was waiting out in the parking lot. The screen lit up with his name. I read the words, and the ink on the page seemed to blur. Mom, after today, I think it is better if you don't come to the house without calling first. We don't need you to worry about anything anymore. I stared at the screen. I blinked, waiting for the follow-up text that would say, just kidding, or explain that he meant something else. But the message sat there, cold and digital. We don't need you. The words felt heavy, like stones dropped into my stomach. I had just signed away the roof over my head to give him security, and his immediate reaction was to set a boundary, to push me out. I looked up, my neck feeling stiff. Through the glass wall of the bank and across the sun-drenched pavement, I saw them. Luke was standing by his car, leaning against the door. Next to him was Sophia. She looked every bit the founder of Luminous Nest Studio, her wellness and lifestyle brand, dressed in beige linen that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting possessively on Luke's arm. They were not looking at the bank. They were not looking for me. They were looking at each other, celebrating a victory that I had just handed them on a silver platter. Mrs. O'Connell, Mike asked. He had pulled the paper slightly toward him, but stopped when he saw my face. "Are you sure about this?" The question hung in the air. "Are you sure?" I looked back at the phone. "We don't need you." I forced the corners of my mouth up. It felt like physically lifting weights. "I am sure." I lied. "It is done." Mike nodded slowly and stamped the document. Thud. The sound was final, like a gavel striking a block. I walked out of the office a few minutes later, clutching my purse against my chest. I stopped in the vestibule, hidden by the tint of the glass doors. I watched Luke open the car door for Sophia. He got into the driver's seat of the SUV, the one I had helped with the down payment for 2 years ago, and pulled out of the lot. He never once looked back at the bank. He did not check to see if I was coming out. He did not wave. I stood there in the silence of the hallway, the deed signed, the house gone, and the text message burning a hole in my pocket. I realized then, with a clarity that cut sharper than any scalpel at the clinic, that I had not just given them a house, I had given them the permission to discard me. Driving my 10-year-old sedan back to the house that technically no longer belonged to me, the silence in the car felt heavy. It reminded me of those long drives home at 4 a.m. when I was still working the night shift as a nurse. Patrick was still alive then, briefly. But after his stroke took him when Luke was just 12, those drives became my only moments of peace. I would grip the steering wheel, my hands smelling of antiseptic soap, and calculate how many hours of sleep I could snatch before I had to wake Luke up for school. I remembered the smell of burnt frozen cheese pizza waiting for me on the counter because I was too tired to cook a real meal. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table with textbooks on healthcare management spread out under the yellow light, my eyes burning as I tried to upgrade my pay grade. Luke had gotten into that technical college in Texas, and the tuition was $40,000 a year. I worked 2 jobs, picking up shifts at the clinic and doing private home care on weekends, just to make sure he never had to take out a student loan. There were so many small moments I chose to forget until now. I recalled sitting on the floor, sewing the ripped sole of his expensive basketball sneakers because we could not afford a new pair that month. I pricked my finger, watching a drop of blood well up. But when he walked in, I hid my hand and forced a smile. I told myself constantly, if he has a future, every ache and pain is worth it. Then came Sophia. She was different. She came from the East Coast, from a family that had summer homes and winter ski trips. When Luke brought her to meet me, she sat on my velvet sofa, the one I had saved for 6 months to buy, and ate my beef stew with a polite, tight smile. "This is quaint. Maggie," she had said, wiping her mouth delicately. "The stew is lovely. And this neighborhood, it has such a real, blue-collar charm to it. Very authentic." It sounded like a compliment, but it felt like she was patting a stray dog on the head. I ignored the sting. I told myself she was just cultured. But the cracks started showing. Hairline fractures in the foundation of our relationship that I plastered over with excuses. Luke stopped calling on Sundays. When I did call, his voice was always rushed, impatient. "Mom, I am busy. Do not call during work hours." Sophia began suggesting they needed space during the holidays to build their own traditions. I nodded and agreed. I told myself this was just how modern families worked. I did not want to be the overbearing mother portrayed in bad sitcoms. The memory of last Thanksgiving hit me the hardest as I turned onto my street. I had bought a 20-pound turkey. I spent 6 hours basting it, setting the table with Patrick's good china, the plates we only used for anniversaries. At 7 in the evening, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Luke. "We are stuck eating with clients. Big opportunity. Do not wait up." I sat there in the flickering light of the television, eating cold turkey sandwiches alone, telling myself they were just building their careers. They had to hustle. I was just the support system. Whenever Luke talked about buying a house in Shadow Ridge, the new luxury development, his eyes lit up in a way they never did when he looked at me. He told me, "Mum, we just need a little leverage. If we use your credit history with ours, the approval odds go up to 90%. That was the first time he asked me to sign something. I did not read the fine print. Why would I? He was my son. He had Patrick's eyes and my chin. I believed, with every fibre of my being, that he would never hurt me. I signed because I thought my usefulness was the only way to keep him close. I pulled into the driveway, staring at the peeling paint on the garage door. My love for him was so big. I whispered to the empty car, realizing the depth of my own mistake, that I stopped loving myself completely. I walked through the front door, but the air inside felt different, thinner somehow. My hand brushed against the wooden railing of the porch that Patrick had sanded and re-stained 2 summers before he died. I stopped at the kitchen doorframe, running my fingers over the faint pencil marks climbing the white paint. Luke at 5, Luke at 10, Luke at 18. These were not just measurements, they were the geography of my life. But legally, as of 2 hours ago, this history belonged to a landlord named Luke O'Connell. I sat down at the old desktop computer in the den to check my email, hoping for a distraction. A notification from the home insurance company sat at the top of the inbox. I opened it. The subject line read, "Policy update, change of ownership confirmed." I scrolled down to the policy details. There it was, in black and white pixels. Primary owner Luke O'Connell. And below that, in a smaller font, my name appeared under a new category, authorized temporary resident. I felt a cold flush spread through my chest. I had been demoted from the queen of my castle to a guest who could be evicted. My phone rang. It was Luke. His voice was bright, energetic, lacking any of the cold distance from his earlier text. "Hey. Mum, the notary just called. Everything is filed," he said, the background noise suggesting he was celebrating. "Listen, next week Sophia and I are going to look at refinancing the mortgage. We can pull out some equity to finally open the second branch of Luminous Nest Studio." I gripped the phone tighter. Refinancing. But Luke, the house, that is my safety net. It is an asset. "Mum, we have to leverage it," he replied quickly, dismissing my concern. "And what about my place here?" I asked, my voice trembling. "If you mortgage it to the hilt." There was a pause. "Mum, don't worry. You are fine for now. When we are stable, really stable, we will find something suitable for your old age. You know, less maintenance, smaller, suitable for your old age." The phrase hit me like a slap. I was not a mother to be cherished. I was a logistics issue to be managed. I was an inventory item that needed to be moved to cheaper storage. "I have to run. Mum, Sophia is popping champagne," he said, and the line went dead. That night, I could not sleep. I pulled the heavy cardboard box of financial records from under my bed. For the last 5 years, whenever Luke brought me a paper to sign a loan extension, a credit check, a co-signing agreement, I had just signed it. I trusted him. I loved him. I sat on the floor under the yellow glow of the lamp and actually read them. Really read them. My eyes widened. There were signatures here I did not remember making. A $10,000 personal loan. 3 years ago, I never saw a penny of that. A credit line extension on my savings account. I stared at the dates. One of the documents was dated on a Tuesday when I was working a double shift at the clinic. I felt sick. The next morning, I cornered Carmen in the break room. Carmen was a 60-year-old nurse with skin like leather and a heart of iron. She listened as I spilled everything: the deed, the text, the suitable for your old age comment, the papers. Carmen slammed her coffee mug down on the table. Maggie, listen to me. You are not a mother to them right now. You are an ATM machine. This is the line. If you do not stop this, they will take the shirt off your back and charge you for the disposal fee. I felt the tears hot on my cheeks. But I am afraid if I stop, he will leave me completely. If I say no, I lose him. Carmen grabbed my shoulders. Maggie, look at yourself. He already left you. He is gone. He is just sticking around because he is still using your money. That is not love. That is a transaction. Her words cut deep, but they cauterized the wound. That evening, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The fluorescent light was harsh on my wrinkles. I looked at the woman staring back, tired, used up, scared. But behind the fear, something else was waking up. A spark of anger. If I don't protect myself, I whispered to my reflection, then who will? It was not a roar yet. It was just a whisper. But it was the first time in 30 years I had put myself first. I walked back into the bank the very next morning. But this time, I did not sit in the glass office with the young, smiling notary. I demanded to see a supervisor in the loan department. I was ushered into a quiet, windowless room at the back to meet Harold, a senior risk management officer with graying temples and eyes that had seen too many bad debts. Harold opened a file on his computer, his brow furrowing as he scrolled. He looked up at me, taking off his reading glasses. Mrs. O'Connell. I must admit, I am confused, Harold said, his voice dry and professional. You are here asking about the terms of the current mortgage, but our records show the property has been refinanced 3 times in the last 5 years. You were not aware of this. My stomach dropped. 3 times. No, that is impossible. Harold pressed a button, and the printer behind him whirred to life. He slid a stack of papers across the desk. I stared at them. There was my signature, Margaret O'Connell, scrawled at the bottom of a loan modification agreement dated 2 years ago. It looked like my handwriting, but the loop on the G was slightly too wide, the slant just a fraction too aggressive. And this, Harold continued, pointing to a column of figures, is the home equity line of credit. There have been consistent withdrawals, roughly $2,000 every month, transferred directly to an external business account. He tapped the line item. Beneficiary Luminous Nest Studio Holdings, LLC, Sophia. The air in the room seemed to vanish. They had not just taken the house yesterday. They had been draining the equity from it for years to fund her yoga mats and essential oils. Harold leaned forward, his tone grave. Mrs. O'Connell, in the state of Colorado, financial exploitation of an at-risk elder is a serious crime. If you did not sign these in person, well, we have a problem. He paused, looking me dead in the eye. Think carefully. Did you stand before a notary for each of these 3 refinances? I tried to search my memory, but there was nothing. No banks, no notaries, just Luke coming over for dinner, asking me to sign a birthday card or a permission slip for a contractor. No, I whispered, my voice shaking. I never came here. The bank, clearly terrified of a lawsuit, escalated the situation immediately. 20 minutes later, I was introduced to Jenna, a sharp-eyed internal investigator. She did not offer me coffee. She offered me hard data. We pulled the digital logs, Jenna said, turning her laptop screen toward me. Here is a general power of attorney document, digitally signed by Margaret O'Connell 18 months ago. It grants your son full access to manage your real estate assets. She pointed to the timestamp. This was signed on November 12th, at 8:30 in the evening. Where were you at that time? Mrs. O'Connell. I closed my eyes. I knew exactly where I was. November was flu season. I was at the clinic, I said, my voice hardening. I was working a double shift. I clocked in at 7 at night and did not leave until 7 the next morning. I can print the timesheets to prove it. Jenna nodded slowly, closing the laptop. If you were at work, you could not have logged in from the IP address associated with your son's home router to sign this. This is identity theft and fraud. She pushed a form toward me. You have the right to file a formal report of financial abuse against your family members right now. We will freeze everything. I stared at the form. My son. My little boy who used to hold my hand when we crossed the street. He had not just been thoughtless. He had looked me in the face, eaten my food, and stolen from me while I wiped sweat from feverish patients to pay his bills. He was a criminal. I stood up. I did not sign the form yet. I took the thick stack of photocopied evidence Jenna had printed for me. I need to think about how I want to handle this, I said. I walked out of the bank into the blinding noon sun. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. I clutched the dossier against my chest. It contained the proof of my foolishness and their betrayal. I walked to my car, unlocked the door, and looked at the empty passenger seat where Luke used to sit. Revenge. I whispered the word for the first time, tasting the iron in it. They want a businesswoman. I will show them how to close a deal. Jenna, the investigator at the bank, had slid a business card across the table to me with a look of pity that I was beginning to despise. The name on the card was Malcolm Hayes. His office was not in one of the glass skyscrapers downtown where Sophia liked to take selfies, but in a sturdy, brick building on a quiet street lined with oak trees. Malcolm was a man in his 50s, with dark skin and the kind of heavy-lidded, observant eyes that missed nothing. He did not offer me tea or sympathy. He just pointed to the chair opposite his desk and asked for the papers. I laid it all out. The unauthorized loans, the credit line withdrawals that drained like a slow leak into Sophia's business account, and the coup de grace, the timesheets from Everlight Haven Clinic. Here, I said, pointing to the dates with a finger that I was proud to see was steady. The bank log says I signed a digital power of attorney on the 12th of November at 8:30 in the evening. But this timesheet shows I was administering an IV to a dehydration patient at the clinic at that exact minute. Malcolm leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. He looked from the timesheet to the bank log, and then to me. Mrs. O'Connell? Let me be blunt, Malcolm said, his voice deep and gravelly. This is not just a case of an ungrateful son. This is not a family dispute. This is systematic, calculated fraud. They did not just borrow your car without asking. They dismantled the engine and sold it for parts while you were still driving it. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it down. If we file this with the district attorney, Malcolm continued, tapping the file, state prosecutors will eat this up. Elder financial abuse is a hot-button issue right now. Luke and your daughter-in-law could be looking at Class 3 felonies. We are talking potentially 4 to 12 years in prison, plus full restitution. The word prison made the room spin. I gripped the armrests of my chair. Prison. I stammered. I want my house back. Mr. Hayes, I want my security. But I cannot be the mother who puts her only child in a cage. How could I ever look at myself, the neighbors, my friends? They would think I am a monster. Malcolm took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked at me with a mixture of exasperation and respect. Mrs. O'Connell, you are not the one putting him in prison, he said firmly. He walked into that cell the moment he forged your signature. You are just the one deciding whether to lock the door. He let that sink in for a moment before leaning forward, his demeanor shifting from lawyer to strategist. So, answer me this, he asked. What do you want most? Is it the money? Is it the house? Or is it something else? I opened my mouth to answer, but the words caught. What did I want? I wanted the last 5 years back. I wanted the trust I had before I knew my sons saw me as a resource to be mined. I want them to know, I said slowly, realizing the truth as I spoke it. I want them to stop looking at me like I am a senile old woman they can trick. I want them to realize that I am not their prey. Malcolm nodded, a small, sharp smile playing on his lips. Respect, he said. Expensive, but attainable. If you don't want to go the criminal route, we can try the civil option. We can set a trap. A trap, I asked. A settlement agreement. Malcolm corrected, though his eyes twinkled. We draft a document where they admit to the fraud in writing. In exchange for you not pressing criminal charges, they agree to transfer full ownership of the house back to you, immediately. And we make them sign over a controlling interest in Luminous Nest Studio as collateral for the cash they stole. They will never sign that, I argued. Sophia protects that company like it is her child. They will if they think they are signing something else, Malcolm said, pulling a yellow legal pad toward him. Criminals who rely on the trust of their victims usually have one fatal flaw. They are arrogant. They think you are too stupid to catch them, and they are too greedy to read the fine print. He outlined the plan. We would create a scenario where signing papers seemed like a win for them, a situation where their greed would blind them to the blade hidden in the ink. I sat there, listening to him construct a plan that would strip my son of his assets just as ruthlessly as he had stripped me of mine. It felt cold. It felt calculating. It felt nothing like the woman who used to bake cookies for the PTA. Mr. Hayes, I said quietly, looking at my hands. If I do this, if I trick them like this, I won't be the nice mom anymore. I will be something else. Malcolm looked at me, his expression unyielding. Mrs. O'Connell, he said. Maybe it is time you stopped playing that role. It clearly does not pay well. I took a deep breath and nodded. Draw it up. I spent the next 3 nights diving into a world I had never cared about before the curated, filtered reality of Luminous Nest Studio, on her public Instagram profile. Sophia was living a life of beige aestheticism and spiritual abundance. There were photos of her doing yoga on a rooftop in downtown Denver at sunset, captions about manifesting destiny, and reels from a luxury wellness retreat in the Arizona desert. Everything looked expensive, effortless, and successful. But I was learning to look closer. Beneath a photo of a $300 hand-woven meditation mat, the comments told a different story. Still waiting on my order from 2 months ago. Is this a scam? One user wrote. The essential oils arrived leaking, and the customer service email bounced back. Wrote another. I decided I needed to see the operation with my own eyes. On Tuesday evening, Sophia was hosting a free empowerment workshop at a rented loft space in the Arts District. I wore a heavy coat and a wool hat pulled low, sitting in the back row behind a pillar. Sophia stood on a raised platform, glowing under professional lighting. She spoke with a mesmerizing cadence, telling the room of 20-something women about her journey. I built Luminous Nest from absolutely nothing, Sophia said, pressing a hand to her chest theatrically. No handouts, no investors. Just grit and the belief that the universe provides. I looked around the room. The teak benches the audience sat on looked familiar. I realized with a jolt that they matched the invoice I had found in the bank records furniture purchased with a withdrawal from my home equity line of credit. She was sitting on my debt while preaching about her independence. The next day, Malcolm handed me a credit report for Luminous Nest Studio Holdings, LLC. It was a disaster. It is a house of cards. Maggie, Malcolm said, sliding the paper across his mahogany desk. They are $60,000 in the red. The only thing keeping the lights on is the steady drip of cash from your house. Without your equity, they are bankrupt in 30 days. I needed one more confirmation. I went to a coffee shop near the university where a former employee of Sophia's was working as a barista. I had found her complaining on a local business forum. After I ordered a latte and left a $20 tip, the girl opened up. Don't work for her, the girl whispered, leaning over the counter while wiping down the espresso machine. She owes me for 3 weeks of back pay. Every time I asked, she just laughed it off. Did she say when she would pay? I asked, keeping my voice casual. The girl rolled her eyes. She told us not to worry about payroll because her mother-in-law is loaded. She said the old lady would sign anything if they just smiled at her. So the money was basically guaranteed. I walked out of that coffee shop feeling a strange sense of calm. It was the calm of a soldier who finally sees the enemy clearly. It was not just Luke. Sophia viewed me as a resource, a walking bank account with a pulse. She felt entitled to my life's work. I went back to Malcolm's office, and we began to construct the trap. It had to be precise. We drafted 3 documents. The first was a statement of acknowledgement, admitting to the unauthorized use of my signature. The second was a transfer agreement, signing over 100% of the shares of Luminous Nest Studio to me. The third was a legal addendum where Luke waived any future claim to my property to avoid prosecution. But how to get them to sign greed, Malcolm said, tapping his pen on the desk. We have to feed the beast one last time. We concocted a cover story. I would tell them that I felt bad about my initial hesitation. I would say that I had spoken to a friend in banking who could secure them a massive credit limit increase to save the business. But the bank required them to sign some internal guarantor forms to restructure the ownership for liability purposes. I called Carmen that night. I need you to act. I told her. You need to come to dinner at the restaurant. You will be the bank contact. Just look professional, nod, and leave early. Honey? Carmen laughed. A rough, smoker's laugh. For what they did to you, I will win an Academy Award. I sat at my kitchen table late that night, staring at the thick folder Malcolm had prepared. My hand rested on the cover page. Inside this folder was the end of my relationship with my son as I knew it. But as I remembered the girl in the coffee shop and Sophia's speech about no handouts, my heart hardened into stone. If I do this, I whispered to the empty room, I am not the victim anymore. I ran my thumb over the edge of the paper. I am the one holding the knife. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over Luke's contact name. It had been weeks of silence, a strategic gap that Malcolm assured me would make them desperate. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to drop an octave, smoothing out the edges until I sounded like the tired, apologetic mother they wanted me to be. "Luke," I said when he answered, making sure to sound a little breathless. I am sorry about the silence. I think I was just being too sensitive about that text message. Old age, I guess." There was a pause, then a sigh. "It's okay. Mom, we have just been really busy." "I know," I said quickly. "Look, I want to make it right. I want to take you and Sophia to dinner. That place downtown, the Copper Terrace." "My treat." "I don't know." "Mom," Luke said, his voice flat. "Sophia is pretty stressed about the business launch. That is actually what I wanted to talk about." I lowered my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I spoke to a friend of mine, a former connection at the bank. He looked at the paperwork, and he thinks there is a way to not only save the house, but actually secure a higher credit limit for Luminous Nest. But we need to move fast." The change in his tone was instantaneous. The boredom vanished, replaced by the sharp, hungry energy I had come to recognize. "Wait. Really? A higher limit? Okay, yeah. We can make dinner?" 7 o'clock, I arrived at the Copper Terrace 15 minutes early. I was wearing the dark blue dress Patrick used to love, the one he said made me look regal, on my finger. I wore my gold wedding band. It felt like putting on armor. I sat at a corner table, placing the black leather briefcase Malcolm had lent me by my feet. Inside lay the instruments of their destruction, neatly collated. When they walked in, they looked like the perfect power couple. Luke was in a fitted blazer, and Sophia wore a silk slip dress that probably cost more than my monthly utility bill. "Maggie." "You look wonderful," Sophia exclaimed, leaning in to give me a hug that barely grazed my shoulders. "That dress makes you look younger." Her eyes, however, did not look at my face. They darted immediately to the black briefcase on the floor. "Thank you, Sophia," I said, smiling the smile I used for difficult patience. "Sit down. Order whatever you like." The waiter came and went. We talked about the weather. We talked about the difficult economic climate. I mentioned that I had picked up 3 extra night shifts last week and that my back was killing me. "That is great." "Mum, staying active is important," Luke said, looking at the wine list. He did not hear me. He did not care that his mother was breaking her back to pay for the appetizers he was about to eat. After the main course was cleared, I saw Luke tap his fingers on the table. He was losing patience. "So," I said, wiping my mouth with a linen napkin. "About the house. I admit. I panicked when I saw the refinancing papers. I did not understand the vision." Sophia leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "It is just business, Maggie. You have to spend money to make money." "I understand that now." I lied smoothly. "My friend at the bank explained that if we structure this correctly, the house acts as a shield for the company. But to get the extended credit line, the bank needs some internal assurances, just to prove that the family is unified. I reached down and lifted the heavy briefcase onto the table. The click of the latches opening sounded like a gunshot in the ambient noise of the restaurant. I pulled out the stack of documents Malcolm and I had prepared. The top few pages were filled with corporate jargon and the luminous Nest logo, looking exactly like the internal guarantees I claimed they were. Buried beneath them, stapled firmly into the packet, were the confessions, the admission of fraud, the transfer of shares, and the waiver of rights. "It looks like a lot," I said, sliding the papers across the white tablecloth. "But mostly it is just acknowledging that we are all on the same page. You can read it later if you want, but the bank needs it scanned by tomorrow morning to approve the funds." Sophia pulled a gold pen from her purse. She was so confident, so used to signing things without looking because she believed the world owed her success. She flipped through the first 2 pages, her eyes scanning only for the words she wanted to see: credit extension and asset protection. "This looks standard," Sophia said, glancing at Luke. "It just says we are prioritizing the family assets for the business growth." "Exactly," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs, though my hands remained folded calmly on the table. "It protects everyone." Luke looked at me. For a second, I saw a flicker of hesitation. "You are okay with this, Mom? Really?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I just want what is best for you. Luke, I want you to have what you deserve." He took the pen from Sophia. He did not read the text. He did not see the clause where he admitted to signing my name on November 12th. He just saw the dollar signs in his head. Scritch, scratch. The sound of the pen on paper was loud. He signed. Then he passed it to Sophia. She signed with a flourish. "There," she said, sliding the stack back to me. "Done?" I picked up the papers, tapped them on the table to straighten the edges, and placed them back into the briefcase. I locked it. Click. "Wonderful," I said softly. Sophia raised her wineglass, her face flushed with the victory of getting what she wanted. To us. To the new future of our family. I raised my water glass, watching the light refract through the liquid. To the future. I echoed. They had no idea that the future they just toasted to was one where they owned nothing. And I owned them. The waiter had just cleared the dessert plates, leaving only the faint scent of vanilla and the tension that was about to snap. I did not wait for the check. I reached down, unlatched the briefcase again, and pulled out a second folder. This one was not crisp and white like the one they had just signed. It was color-coded with neon yellow highlighter marks that screamed for attention. I placed it in the center of the table, right between the candle and Sophia's empty wineglass. "You might want to read the title of what you just signed," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the low hum of the restaurant. Luke frowned, reaching for the document. "Mom, we just went over this. It is the bank guarantee. Read it," I commanded, sharper this time. He looked down. I saw his eyes scan the header I had highlighted in yellow, Statement of Acknowledgement of Unauthorized Use of Signature and Elder Assets, Luke O'Connell and Sophia Martinez O'Connell. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a ghost. Sophia, sensing the shift in the air, snatched the paper from his hand. "What is this?" she snapped, her voice rising. "What does this mean?" "It means," I said, pointing a finger at the first highlighted paragraph, "that you just legally admitted to forging my signature on 3 separate refinancing applications." Clause 4 confirms you knew I was not present. Clause 7. I shifted my finger to point at Sophia. Admits that you knowingly diverted funds from a secured home equity line of credit into a high-risk business account for Luminous Nest Studio. This is a trick, Luke stammered, pushing his chair back. You tricked us. This is fraud. It is not fraud. Luke, it is a confession, I replied calmly. I reached into my purse and placed a small, silver USB drive on the table next to the papers. And before you deny it, this entire dinner has been recorded. Every word about you needing the money, every lie about the business. Oh, and if you look 3 tables behind you, you will see Carmen. Luke spun around. Carmen lowered her menu and gave him a cold, hard wave. She is witnessing this conversation, I continued. So, here are your options. Option A is simple. Tomorrow morning, my lawyer Malcolm and I take this signed confession, the recording, and the bank's internal investigation report to the district attorney. You will both be charged with Class 3 felonies. You will go to prison. Sophia let out a strangled gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. Option B, I said, leaning forward. You execute the civil agreement you also just signed. You transfer 100% of Luminous Nest Studio to me as restitution. You vacate my house in 30 days. And you agree to a repayment plan for every single cent you stole. You want my company, Sophia screeched, tears suddenly streaming down her perfectly made-up face. She turned viciously toward Luke. You said she was stupid. You said she would just sign whatever we gave her. I thought it was family money. I didn't know it was illegal. Luke looked at his wife, stunned. Sophia, you were the one who printed the papers. You told me it was fine. Don't you dare blame me, she hissed, her facade of the supportive wife crumbling instantly. I am not going to jail because you are too weak to ask your mother for money. It was pathetic. It was ugly. And it was exactly what Malcolm had predicted. Luke turned to me, his eyes wet, his hands shaking as he reached across the table. Mom, please. You are not going to do this. I am your son. You wouldn't send your own son to prison. Right, you love me. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had been my entire world, the boy I had worked double shifts for, the child whose scraped knees I had bandaged. And I felt nothing but a deep, hollow ache where my heart used to be. You love me, I repeated quietly. Then my voice hardened into steel. You have been doing this to me for 5 years without blinking an eye. You stole my retirement. You stole my trust. You stole my home. Did you love me then? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. People at the nearby tables were staring now. The silence at our table was heavy, suffocating. I stood up, smoothing the front of my blue dress. You have 24 hours, I said, looking down at them. If Malcolm does not receive the confirmation email by 6 o'clock tomorrow evening, he files the criminal charges. I am not saving you this time. I turned and walked away. My legs felt heavy, and my chest felt like it was being crushed by a vice. But I did not stumble. Behind me, I heard Sophia sobbing and Luke whispering my name, but I did not turn around. I walked out of the copper terrace and into the cool night air, finally breathing for the first time in years. The morning sun did not bring relief. It brought a long, desperate email from Luke. It arrived at 8 o'clock, filled with legal-sounding jargon that I knew he had Googled the night before. He pleaded for more time, claiming he needed to consult with independent counsel to review the complexities of the civil agreement. It was a delay tactic, a child trying to stay up past bedtime by asking for water. I did not reply. I forwarded the email directly to Malcolm. His response came back 3 minutes later, sharp and uncompromising. Do not engage. They are testing the electric fence to see if it is turned on. It is at noon. My phone rang. It was Sophia. She did not sound like the CEO of a lifestyle brand anymore. She sounded like a frightened girl. Maggie, please, we can work this out? She stammered, her voice pitching up in panic. We can keep this in the family. I can write you into the company bylaws. We can give you 10% of the profits. Just, please call off the lawyer. I listened to her beg, thinking of the times I had sat alone in my kitchen while they dined out on my equity. I waited for her to finish. Tomorrow, after 6 o'clock, you can explain your offer to the state prosecutor, I said, my voice flat. Do not call me again. I hung up. The hours dragged by like lead weights. I sat in my living room, watching the clock hands move. 5 o'clock, 5:30, at 5:40. Malcolm called. It is done, he said. I just received the package from their attorney. They have accepted all terms. We have appointments set for tomorrow to sign the deed transfer, the stock handover, and the repayment schedule. I should have felt a surge of triumph. I should have pumped my fist in the air. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow silence open up inside me. It felt like I had just pushed my own son off a ledge to save myself. And now, I was just waiting to hear the thud. The signing the next day was a funeral for a relationship that had actually died years ago. We met at the same notary office where this nightmare had started. Luke sat across from me, his shoulders slumped, looking 5 years older than he had 2 days ago. He signed the quitclaim deed, transferring the property back to me. Then he signed the addendum, a binding commitment to vacate the premises within 30 days and waiving any future claim to my estate. Sophia was next. Her face was pale, stripped of makeup, her eyes red-rimmed. She signed the documents transferring 100% of Luminous Nest Studio holdings to me. She pushed the papers away as if they burned her fingers. I hope you are happy, she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't even know if the company is worth anything to you. It is worth exactly what you spent of my money to build it, I replied. 2 days later, I drove over to the house. The front door was open, inside. The hallway was lined with cardboard boxes. The walls, once decorated with artful photos of Luke and Sophia's wedding and their expensive travels, were now bare, marked only by the ghost-like outlines where the frames had hung. The house felt stripped, like a body without a soul. I walked into the living room. The custom Italian sofa was gone, sold, or moved, leaving deep indentations in the carpet. Luke was standing in the middle of the empty room, holding a roll of packing tape. He looked at me, then looked around at the wreckage of his life. Mum, he said, his voice cracking. Was there really no other way? I looked at him. I saw the boy I had raised, the boy I had protected from the world until I realized I needed to protect myself from him. There were 1,000 other ways. Luke, I said. And I was surprised by how tired I sounded. The anger was gone, replaced by a heavy, grey fatigue. There were so many times you could have just been honest. There were so many times you could have treated me like a person instead of a bank account. You walked past every single off-ramp. He looked down at his shoes, the silence between us stretching out, filling the empty room. "I did not do this to you," I added softly. "I just stopped letting you do it to me." The echo in the living room was louder than I remembered, bouncing off the bare walls where the 60-inch television used to hang. Luke sat on a taped-up cardboard box, his head in his hands. He looked small in the emptiness, stripped of the arrogance that had defined him for the last 5 years. "It was Sophia who brought up the idea first," Luke said, his voice barely a whisper, staring at the floor. She said you wouldn't mind helping if you knew how big the business could get. But I was the one who said yes. I was the one who practiced your signature on a notepad until I got the loop of the M right. I heard the alarm bells in my head. Mom. And I just turned them off. He finally looked up at me, his eyes red. "Are you going to sue me later?" Even if I leave, I stood by the window, watching a stray leaf blow across the driveway. "If you stick to the agreement?" "Luke, if you make every single repayment installment on time and do not try any legal maneuvers to reclaim this property, I will not file the criminal report. The statute of limitations gives me time. The file stays in Malcolm's safe." He nodded slowly, accepting the sword hanging over his head. "But there is one more condition," I said, pulling a single sheet of paper from my pocket. Luke frowned. "What is this?" "It is a referral to a financial responsibility counselor," I said. "Specifically, a program for family members who have committed financial abuse. You are going to sign up for the full 12-week course. You are going to sit there and listen to what you did to me." Luke recoiled, his face flushing with shame. "Mom, come on. That is humiliating. It puts a label on me. It makes me look like a criminal." "You have already earned the label." "Luke," I said, my voice cutting through his defense like a knife through soft butter. "You have been wearing it for years. You just pretended you didn't see it in the mirror." For a second, looking at his slumped shoulders, a wave of maternal instinct washed over me. I wanted to tear up the papers. I wanted to tell him to just stay, that we would figure it out, that I would make him a grilled cheese sandwich like I did when he was 7. But then the image of the bank documents flashed in my mind. I saw the dates. I saw myself drinking cold coffee at 3 a.m. during a double shift, my feet throbbing, while he was signing my name to pay for a desert retreat. The wave receded, leaving behind a shoreline of solid rock. Luke took the pen. His hand shook. But he signed the enrollment form. He handed it back to me. "I will send the first check next month," he said quietly. "I got a job at a warehouse. It pays hourly. I am moving into a studio apartment on the south side. It is not great, but it is cheap." "Good," I said. "Work hard." He stood up, lifting the final box onto his shoulder. He hesitated at the door, turning back to look at me one last time. "I know I messed up," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I don't deserve it. But maybe one day. Can we talk? Like we used to?" I looked at him, feeling a profound sense of finality. "From now on, Luke, you do not have the right to expect anything from me," I said, my voice steady and dry. "Do not call me for holidays. Do not call me for birthdays. If one day I decide I want to speak to you, I will be the one to call." He nodded, swallowing hard, and walked out the door. I followed him to the porch. I watched him load the box into the back of a rented truck. He climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove away. I did not wave. I did not slam the door. I just watched until his taillights disappeared around the corner. The roles had finally reversed. He was the one leaving with uncertainty, and I was the one standing on solid ground. I turned back into the silent house. I walked to the kitchen and placed the thick folder labeled Luminous Nest Studio on the old oak table. Tomorrow. I would call a broker to liquidate the assets of the company. Tomorrow. I would start planning a renovation for this house, not for a family, but for me. I walked over to the doorframe leading to the pantry. I reached out and traced the faint pencil marks that climbed the wood. Luke at 8 years old. Luke at 10. I let my finger rest on the highest mark. I kept my promise to take care of you until the very end. I whispered to the empty room. The rest of my life. I am going to keep my promise to myself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop a comment below, sharing your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far our community reaches if you enjoyed this story. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video get discovered by more people who need to hear it.